My grandmother never once pulled a tick off herself in 40 years of working that land. 5 plants at the garden gate. Every one of them grows wild in these mountains. I still keep the same 5 at my gate. I crush the beautyberry leaves against my forearm before I open the gate. The oil comes up immediately, something between fruit and turpentine, slightly bitter where I touched my face without thinking. The gate latch runs cold iron in the early morning. Beyond it, the tall grass is already up to the knee, and the Haywood County Ridge holds the dew in the tree line. Late May. I've known since I was old enough to reach that latch that the ticks are out there waiting. They don't wander. That's the first thing to understand. A tick climbs to the tip of a grass blade or a low branch and holds its front legs out. It's waiting for something warm to brush past. The place it waits is exactly where the path meets the tall growth, exactly where the garden gate opens onto the yard. Every grandmother who planted along that edge knew something, even if she couldn't have told you the chemistry. She had watched what happened when the plants were there and what happened when they weren't. People had been using one plant at that gate for 40 years before any scientist figured out what was in it or why it worked. The practice was ahead of the science by 4 decades. I'll tell you which one. Deet was developed in 1946, registered for public use in 1957. The garden gate goes back centuries further than that. Off! Deep Woods has been the answer for nearly 70 years. S.C. Johnson has sold that bottle to 3 generations of people who forgot there was anything before it. But before Deet, the gate was what stood between the family and the tick line, and grandmothers planted it deliberately. 5 plants. Each one doing something specific, asking nothing of you but a handful of leaves and a moment before you step through. The tick repellent industry will sell you a spray, a collar, a yard treatment, a wipe, a bracelet. It's a substantial business. What it won't tell you is that one of the most effective tick repellents ever tested grows wild across the American South and can be crushed in your palm for free. The chemistry arrived in 2006. The practice had been at the garden gate for as long as anyone could remember. Here's what I haven't told you yet. The same plant that grows at my gate right now is tied to the morning I was born, and I'm not going to explain that until the very end. First, you need to understand why any of this works at all. A tick can't see well. What it has instead is a specialized organ on its front pair of legs called Haller's organ. Think of it as a chemical antenna tuned to find you. It reads your exhaled breath, your body heat from several feet away, and the specific chemistry rising off your skin. That organ is how a tick sitting on a grass blade knows you're coming down the path before you reach it. A 2025 test measured the electrical signals inside Haller's organ directly. It showed that geraniol, the compound in rose geranium, doesn't merely smell unpleasant to ticks. It disrupts those signals. The tick's navigation system goes quiet. It can't lock onto you. That isn't poetic language. That's what the testing showed. American Beautyberry works differently. The compound inside its leaves, colocarpinol, wasn't even known to science until 2005. No one had ever pulled it out and given it a name before that year. A USDA botanist named Charles Bryson had been crushing those leaves on his own skin for nearly 40 years, the same way his grandfather did in Stoneville, Mississippi. His grandfather cut branches with the leaves still on them and crushed them to tuck between the horse harness and the horse's skin to keep the flies and ticks away. The chemistry that explains why it works came decades after the practice. Bryson's grandfather learned it by watching what the ticks did. The Ojibwe and Chippewa peoples used wild bergamot, a plant native to the full Appalachian range and the same woodland edges where ticks wait, crushing the fresh leaves against the skin before entering brush. Mormon's catalog of native plant uses documents it plainly. European settlers carried a parallel practice with them when they came through the mountain passes. Pennyroyal tucked into boot tops and strewn at thresholds, a tradition Hildegard von Bingen documented in the 12th century and the Romans recorded even before that. Dioscorides called Pennyroyal pulegium, from pulex, the Latin word for flea. That anti-parasite purpose was baked right into the name. 3 traditions arrived at the same method without sharing a library. Rub fresh, aromatic leaves on your skin and clothing edges before you step into tick territory. Bryson's grandfather crushed Beautyberry against the harness. The Ojibwe crushed wild bergamot against the skin. The European settlers tucked Pennyroyal into their boot tops. One method, 3 observations. Centuries apart, what else got passed down at a garden gate that never made it into a textbook? Catnip is the plant on this list most people would laugh off first. What happened when scientists pulled out the active part and tested it alone? Instead of using the whole leaf, changes how you think about every plant on this list, not just this one. The anchor is American Beautyberry, Caulocarpa americana, the shrub with brilliant purple berries that runs wild along fence, rows, and hollow edges across the south and the mountains both. Don't use the berries for this. Don't use dried material. The compound you need, caulocarpinol and a second one called intermedial, lives in the fresh leaf. When you crush it, those compounds release immediately into the air and onto your skin. Drying destroys what you need before it ever reaches you. Commercial Beautyberry products don't carry it at the strength you need. No water, no heat, nothing to mix or prepare. The leaf does it all. Take 1 full handful of fresh leaves, 15 to 20 leaves, enough to fill the palm. Crush them between both hands until they feel juicy and the smell rises sharp. Rub them directly on all exposed skin, and especially on your clothing at the wrists and ankles. The wrists and ankles are where ticks most often move from the brush onto your skin. Those are the gaps that matter. Do this at room temperature, with fresh leaves. That's the entire preparation. Most of what I share on here, my grandmother never wrote down. She just knew. Every week I put up a new one. Another plant, another preparation, another thing that almost did not make it through. If that matters to you, stick around. I would love to have you. The protection from crushed fresh leaves runs approximately 2 hours. When the compound was tested directly, it held full protection at 3 hours and began dropping off after that. Fresh, crushed leaves in the field. Plan for 2 hours and reapply before going back into brush. For a full day of backcountry hiking, Deet at full strength remains the right answer, and I'm not here to tell you otherwise. Beautyberry is the garden gate preparation. It's the yard work preparation. It's what you reach for before you open the latch on a May morning when the grass is already high. The one sign that tells you it worked. You can smell the plant on your skin. What keeps the ticks off is the same thing producing that sharp, slightly bitter fruit and turpentine scent on your skin. If you can't smell it on your skin after rubbing, use more leaves or find fresher material. The smell is the signal. Now, catnip. This is the plant that most people dismiss because they think of it as something for cats. Catnip grows in every dooryard garden that ever existed in these mountains. The compound inside it, nepetalactone, repels the young black-legged ticks that carry Lyme as well as Deet does. But here's the part that matters for how you prepare it. Pull nepetalactone out and purify it on its own, and it performs worse than the whole plant. The whole plant has 2 forms of the compound, plus a third one. The chemists call it caryophyllin, and the 3 together produce an effect no single piece of it can match. Isolate it, and you destroy the very thing you're trying to get. Crush fresh catnip leaves and rub them on your clothing, or grow it at the path edge and let what it gives off drift into the air. Don't buy a catnip extract and expect the same result. The chemistry of the whole plant is the point. Rose geranium is the one nobody suspects, because it looks purely decorative. Pelargonium graveolens grew in Appalachian dooryard gardens as an ornamental that also worked. The compound is geraniol, tested against brown dog ticks in 2024 and confirmed to hold alongside Deet when put to the same test. Planted at the garden edge. The living plant releases geraniol into the air as the leaves move. That's a living barrier at the exact edge where ticks wait. Pennyroyal is the one that needs a warning label before we go any further. American Pennyroyal, Hedioma pelagoides, the native Appalachian species, not the European import. Goes into your boot tops and along the clothing hem before you enter thick brush. Fresh or dried leaves tucked into the sock, rubbed against the cuff of the pants. That's the traditional preparation, and it's the safe one. I'm going to say this plainly. and I'm going to say it once. Pennyroyal essential oil has caused human deaths and miscarriages. The oil is not the tradition. The leaves are the tradition. Never use Pennyroyal essential oil on skin. Never swallow any part of it. Never use it around pregnant women or around pets. The leaves on the outside. That's what every grandmother here used and what every record confirms. Hedioma pulegoides, the American plant. On the outside only, never inside. Lavender fills the border and supports the whole arrangement. What it gives off. Linalool is what chemists call the main thing in it, adds to what's already working. Yarrow, which grows wild along every path edge in these mountains, carries its own scent that ticks avoid. Neither one is the primary weapon. Both belong in the border planting because the logic here is overlapping coverage. Different compounds hitting Haller's organ from more than one direction at once. A garden border with catnip, rose geranium, pennyroyal, lavender, and beautyberry at the gatepost puts that protection at precisely the location where ticks extend their legs and wait. That's placement logic. The check you do when you come back inside. That's where the protection holds or falls apart. When's the last time you actually did a full one? The window for catching a tick before it causes trouble is shorter than most people think. I'll give you that before I close. I want to be clear about what this does and what it doesn't do. Beautyberry, catnip, and rose geranium repel ticks at garden boundaries and on clothing for approximately 2 to 3 hours each time you put them on fresh. Beautyberry held alongside Deet against the blackleg ticks that carry Lyme. That's the strongest test it's been put through. Lone Star ticks haven't been tested the same way. Stay with me, because this next part matters most. These preparations don't kill ticks that are already attached. They don't replace extended backcountry protection. For a full day in the deep woods, use Deet at the amount on the label and do a full tick check when you come out. Pennyroyal is leaves on the outside, never inside. The oil is something else entirely, and it's not safe. After any time outdoors, check for ticks. The window for preventing illness after a tick attaches is 24 to 36 hours, and that window applies regardless of what repellent you used. I mean that. The morning I was born, my mother crushed Beautyberry against the doorframe to keep the flies back. I didn't know that until I was grown and she told me. By then, I'd been doing the same thing without knowing that was what it was. I'd just watched her do it. The gate is still there. The beautyberry still grows along the left post where my grandmother put it. I don't know how many decades ago that was. By planting it there, and by showing a child what to do with it, she preserved something. Something no scientist had named or measured until 2005. It was working before anyone could explain why. It's still working now. If you know what your grandmother grew along the garden fence or at the gate, tell me in the comments. I'd like to know what she put there and why.